Thank God it's Monday. Welcome to Business Morning here on Channels Television. It's a new week, an opportunity to make money and have current and relevant business conversations for 5 days. And you can only get it here on Business Morning. I'm Ini John McCall. Well, let's get into it now. Oil prices stabilized in Asian trade on Monday as investors sought cues from broader financial markets, while comments by Russian President Vladimir Putin over the weekend rocketed up geopolitical tensions in Europe. Brent crude futures held unchanged at $74.99 a barrel after hitting a season high of $75.64 a barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures was at $69.29 a barrel, and that's up 3 cents after rising to $69.92 earlier in the session. Brent rose 2.8% last week, while WTI rebounded 3.8% as jitters in the banking sector eased. Oil markets are closely watching sentiment in financial markets, while oil fundamentals remain sidelined. We come to Nigeria, where official Forex reserve status data obtained from the Central Bank of Nigeria indicates that Forex reserves declined by $163.67 million last week. It capped a 10-week consecutive fall. The data shows that Forex reserves depleted from $37.211 billion by January 16, 2023 to $35.78 billion at the past weekend. Nigeria's external reserves, which closed in 2022 at about $33.08 billion, had peaked at $37.211 billion on the 16th of January. It has since been on the decline, dropping to a lower level every week over the past 10 weeks. Over the past 10 weeks, the Naira had depreciated from 453 Naira 58 kobo for a dollar to 460 Naira 98 Naira for a dollar. And still staying here in Nigeria, the Central Bank of Nigeria has launched the Agro e-naira wallet for farmers in the northern part of the country, where about 4 million farmers are to benefit. The director of ICT at the CBN, Rekia Mohammed, made the disclosure in Adamawa State, the capital, Yola, during the launch and flag off of the Agro program Money e-naira engagement for farmers. According to the CBN, the initiative, which is the first of its kind, is geared towards assisting local farmers with farm inputs through the e-naira wallet, as the programmable money is aimed at transforming the agri sector and increasing efficiency and productivity.
The agricultural sector contributes about 25% of the country's gross domestic product, thereby providing employment to many Nigerians. Despite this significant contribution, access to credit facilities by farmers has been a major concern to the rural farming communities. In its bid to address the situation, the Central Bank of Nigeria is collaborating with the Association of Northern Agricultural and Allied Commodities Practitioners to launch the Farmers Programmable Money and Agro e-money engagement.
The first use case, the programmable money is going to be put into not only in Nigeria but in the entire world, I can tell you. So I will need to congratulate the organizers. I need to congratulate all of you who are going to be the beneficiaries, the entire communities who are going to benefit from this. We're going to see tremendous progress, tremendous transformation, because with technology and innovation, a lot of the things that are introduced through human intervention will be done away with.
The national president of the practitioners identifies the program as an avenue for the CBN to disburse funds to agro dealers and processors.
For our flag of today, we have demonstrated 12 farmers who are already onboarded. We have identified 50 farmers who were captured, and in a long-term strategic plan, we need to onboard 1 million farmers for the next wet season and dry season. And our strategic engagement is that for the next 10 years, we are hopeful of putting together 6 million actors. What I mean by actors is that all actors in the agri value chain, people that are producing, who are the farmers, the processors, the marketers, and all actors in the agri sector will be put under this platform. And we are leveraging on Nigerian digital currency, the e-naira, to ease the process, to make it honest, to make it transparent, and to make it easy for both farmers and input suppliers.
As Adamawa State continues to enjoy relative peace, this initiative, if properly utilized, will not only boost agriculture production, but will ensure food security for the country.
Yeah, welcome back. Well, it was a busy weekend for the banks in most states in the country as they were in operations. Unlike the normal times, we saw banks open on Saturday and Sunday. This follows the directive of the regulator, the Central Bank of Nigeria, and some banks have already indicated that the CBN has released more old notes to deposit money banks as the Apex Bank steps up efforts to flood the economy with more cash after a prolonged cash crunch that has made life difficult for a whole lot of Nigerians. And here on Channels Television, we have been bringing you those reports, the pictures at ATMs, at banks, and some of our reporters have even shared their personal experience. Well, we do know that late last week, the NLC did threaten to close down the economy, down tool and picket CBN offices following this cash crunch. And we don't know if that will still be holding, seeing that the CBN seems to have stepped up its game. But anyway, we know one of those who have been talking about this have been the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association. They've been talking about this cash crunch and some other burning issues in the economy. So we have the Director General, now Mr. Diwale Oyerinde, joining us. Good morning, Mr. Oyerinde. Thank you for your time this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
The last time we spoke to you, you were not in Nigeria. How was your trip back?
Very well. Well, we thank God for a good outing at the ILO Governing Board meeting.
I remember one of the questions I asked you then was, what are you bringing back after all of the meetings? You know, what difference will it make? But I mean, let's not get distracted because we have really burning issues now.
Absolutely.
NECA has been talking a whole lot about what's going on in the country. Obviously, because you're speaking from the perspective of employers and your employee who are affected directly by all of this. And top on the list is the last one you talked about was the proposed strike by NLC, and you seem not to be happy with that proposal.
Well, for us, while the NLC has its mandate, has its prerogative, and one of those is the protection of workers. Workers' interest is paramount within the context of what the NLC will do. And from our perspective, also the protection of the enterprises is also one of our core mandates. While you can't separate one from the other, so the need for both of them to work together. As you protect the enterprises, you are invariably protecting the employees. As you protect the employees, you are also invariably protecting the employers. So for us, it's more like sounding a note of caution to say while the situation is bad, the economy is suffering from the actions of the CBN, we feel also that the strike at this point might also be a bit of counterproductive. So rather than go the whole hog of downing the economy, we would rather preach social dialogue, that we keep dialoguing, that we keep talking about it, because the private sector is bleeding basically now. Businesses are closing down. Businesses are operating under very low capacity utilization levels. And the need for us to explore maximally social dialogue is more important now. Also, at the ILO Governing Board meeting, one of the key issues that played out is the power of social dialogue. We can achieve more through building consensus. And thank God the CBN has responded expressly as we advise, as we urge. Whether it was in response to the NLC's threat, we wouldn't want to go to that discussion. But the most important thing is that everybody has responded. NLC has made this call. NECA has also urged caution, and the CBN has taken a cue and also taken very drastic action, which is positive.
So, I mean, following the weekend banking we saw this past 2 days, have you noticed changes? Have you had conversations with individuals? Is there cash now? Is the situation better?
Well, you don't expect an immediate and instantaneous. It's not like a flip, that you flip the coin and everywhere is good and rosy again. the process was transitory when everybody had to deposit their cash in the bank. There was a process. We all went to the bank to queue, and then somewhere along the line we find ourselves going back to the bank again, reversing that process. So the same process that you used in going to deposit your cash in the bank, probably might not spend the same hours, but the most important thing is that action has been taken. The Saturday and Sunday banking is quite commendable. We think it's good thinking. If we had thought about all this before, if we had tried to build consensus around the issue of the Naira redesign, we wouldn't have come to this point of wasting man-hour, people going to the bank on Saturday and on Sunday, times that they are supposed to use to recover from the week-long work. So it's quite unfortunate, and part of the issues we've raised is for us to deal with those inherent contradictions in our system, and that's one of them that is playing out. We rushed out with a process that was beautiful, that's supposed to be laudable, that's supposed to take us another step towards financial inclusiveness for our people. And because we didn't handle it well, we are now reversing the whole process. The man-hour that has been spent even by the CBN eggheads that have been meeting to fashion out these policies, the man-hour that was spent by Nigerians going to queue to deposit their cash, then looking for cash, the crisis, inherent crisis, self-inflicted crisis that we caused by the fight in some areas in the country because people don't have access to their cash, the embarrassment we caused ourselves as a nation because we couldn't deal with just what we call minor issues. And now we have reversed all those processes. So the cash that we couldn't give people before, we are now in an emergency state.
There's even the fear of, with so much money now being pumped back into the economy, inflation is already at 21.91%. There's the fear of, this much more cash feeding into inflation again.
That is debatable, because really, for you to grow, you must create a system where production is not breached. So production, no matter what level, either at the local level, at the micro or macro level, production must continue and consumption must continue. It has basic, simple economics. So if you short-circuit production or you short-circuit consumption, then you've created a breach that will affect your economy on the whole. So what we did was, in the attempt to come up with a laudable policy, as we call it, we breached production and we also breached consumption, which called a stalemate even our development. So the issue of Nigeria being oversaturated with Naira, experts have said it's debatable that Nigeria is not. Within the context of comparison, global comparison, the quantum of Naira that we have in the economy is not enough to cause us crisis. So we should desist from just calling a dog a bad name in order to hang it.
All right, so we have this, we have inflation, we have the after effects of the cash crunch, we have issues of insecurity, we have issues of unemployment, we have all of this waiting for the incoming administration. As NECA, how do we move forward? You did talk about the issue of dialogue. Yeah. Even in the introduction of the redesigned Naira, a lot of people have said there was not enough dialogue.
Absolutely.
As NECA, what are you doing? You have a place to fill. It's a private sector driven economy, at least that's what it's supposed to be in Nigeria. Yeah. And a lot of people believe that the president-elect is pro-private sector. What are you guys doing as NECA to push this forward and ensure that we do not go back, to where we're coming from?
Well, the incoming, the president-elect, as you say, is pro-private sector, and it is led for us to see in the context of implementation of the policies that the government will come up with. At the level of NECA, at the level of the organized private sector of Nigeria, where we have NECA, we have Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, MAN, we have NASIMA, we have NASME, we have NASI. We've come up with an agenda for the incoming government. And beyond the agenda, as I said, the problems are multifaceted. And you take a multifaceted approach, leveraging on building national consensus. There are so many issues on ground, so many challenges. It will be unfortunate if the incoming government or personnel of the government feel they can resolve those issues by just coming up with policies. Whatever policy you come up with, you need to build a national consensus around that policy. You need to get the citizens around. You need to get the private sector behind those policies. Because whatever policy you create, those policies are not to operate in isolation. You are creating them for individuals, for businesses to operate. So it is advisable that when you're coming up with those policies, at the point of crafting those policies, at the point of implementing those policies, at the point of reviewing those policies, that you get the private sector involved in those policies. Because as I said, globally, for every 10 jobs, the private sector creates at least 8 of those jobs. So if you want to deal with the issue of unemployment, you want to deal with the issue of revenue shortages, you want to deal with the issue of foreign direct investment, your best ally is the private sector. So we've shared this communication with the incoming government, with their officers, and we'll continue to share our perspective on how to take Nigeria to the next level. The Nigerian project is our project. It's not really the government project. All Nigerians must line up. They must seek the concurrence of all Nigerians so that we can take ourselves out of this self-inflicted quagmire.
So Nigeria is never, I don't think, has ever been lack of policy, even good policies. But the issue has been implementation of it. Now, when you talk of national dialogue, national unity, it could sound vague, What would be the practical steps you expect to see, from the incoming administration, from the president-elect, to give you assurance that, oh, this is more than what we used to have, which is always on paper. We have the good policies on paper, we have the good ideas on paper,
Absolutely.
And we hardly see it, materialize.
Absolutely.
What would be those practical steps? Is it sit down with members of MAN or NECA, talk about this, and then after this, we see you move? What are those practical steps?
I think first, let me. You mentioned national unity. National unity is the cliche for politicians. So we'll drop the context of national unity for them to play with. But for us, 2 things will be very important. Two things amongst many other important things. One will be, first, is the caliber of the cabinet. The caliber of the cabinet is the first pointer to know whether we are serious or not. We want people that we want technocrats with very viable experience. They might not be doctors, they might not be professors, but people that have shown through their antecedents that they can run a business, they can manage a project, they can manage an enterprise. That is the first thing. If you mix it at the point of who adds worth, then no matter how beautiful your policy is, you've lost it in the first place. So once we deal with the context of who adds worth, you've dealt with the main and issue that can fundamentally affect where you are going. Then the second point will be let's now sit down, as we have urged severally, that whatever policy is coming up with, we are coming up with. I said the problems are multifaceted. Then let there be a consensus between the policy, those that are crafting the policy, those that the policy will affect, and those that will supervise the policies. If you create a consensus between them, or an alignment for a more appropriate word, then we have positioned ourselves not only to implement those policies, but to jointly, continually review those policies. When they are not working, then we can review. One of my mentors said, it is better to be inconsistent than to persist in error. Over time, what we have seen is government policies, when they realize it's erroneous, it's not working, rather than be humble and let's reverse this policy, let's review it jointly. Then you see them coming up with different data, different pronouncements to say it's working, this is doing this is doing that, which is not really true. So our position is this: get the right men for the job. And we are, the president-elect said it will be government of competence, not of national unity, which is probably a first place to start. Get competent people. We have them in Nigeria. We have them outside this Nigeria. Nigeria doing great and wonderful things outside this country. Why are they working there? And when they come into our system,
they become handicapped. We must deal with that and then deal with the issue of building that consensus, that national consensus between all operatives of the government and then the private sector and then all other stakeholders in this economy. That is the direction I think we should go amongst many other directions.
Okay, these are the first steps that Nigeria Employers Consultative Association would like to see. Thank you so much, Director General Adewale Oyerunde, for your time this morning.
Thank you.
All right, and still talking about expectations from the incoming administration, Nigerians have missed massive infrastructure development, and that's because of the protracted fuel subsidy regime in the country. This is the view of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited. The NNPCL disclosed that the federal government spends as much as 4.8 trillion naira yearly on fuel subsidy at the expense of overall well-being of the Nigerian people. NNPCL believes that the amount spent on fuel subsidy payments can provide Nigerians basic infrastructure, including 7,500 kilometers of road network every year at 400 million naira per kilometer, 37 well-equipped, 120 beds tertiary health centers every year. Well, let's hear how or possible this is with Mr. Ayobami Oyalowo, a development economist who's joining us from our Abuja studio. Good morning, Mr. Oyalowo. Thank you for your time this morning.
Good morning, Ini.
So,
nice to be on your program.
Good to have you. So, the subsidy is supposed to end by mid this year, at least with the new administration. And we see NNPCL giving us numbers and hope now that if subsidy is removed, then every year we can have about 7,500 kilometers of road. Do you see what the NNPCL sees?
Well, while I don't know the numbers the NNPC has dropped, I have my own grouse against the NNPC with the way they have handled a lot of things. I will rather look at the fact that clearly we have a huge infrastructure deficit. And from all indication, we will need about $100 to $150 million per annum within the next 10 years to close the infrastructural gap. And the current administration has tried in terms of trying to create a lot of infrastructure, trying to build roads, trying to build rails, but we still have a huge deficit. And then I think removing the fuel subsidy, it's a good way to start. Because whatever the numbers we've been hearing from the NNPC, they look scary, and I think one of the best way to go about it will be to check the numbers, because sometimes we hear we consume 55 million liters per day, at times we hear 75. The numbers are scary, and then I have a feeling that these things are not the way they are supposed to be. I believe some people are taking advantage of Nigeria, and so let the subsidy leave, then we can truly know how much we consume in terms of fuel, that is petrol, which is PMS, per day in Nigeria as a country. Now, be that as it may, the incoming administration will truly need a lot of funds to be able to continue to meet the infrastructural development of Nigeria, and infrastructure will consist of not just roads and rails and bridges. You look at power, you look at dam, because if you remember, just sometimes last year, we had this very huge flooding that destroyed a lot of lives, properties, and farmlands because of some dams that were opened in some other country. So we will need to have this, and this administration that is coming said they will have a catchment system where you can actually collect this water and prevent the unnecessary losses that we always incur every time we have these dams being opened in this country. So yes, our infrastructural deficit is huge. The money needed is huge. Therefore, any wastages that can be eliminated is a welcome development and a welcome idea, so that you can plot back such kind of funds into developing our infrastructure, building our roads and rails, and developing our economy, so that we can have a country that actually can compete with the modern world that we call ourselves. Because you can't say we're a giant of Africa while we are still nursing some issues that has to do with teething issues as a country.
Interesting that you talked about wastage there, because a lot of people would not say subsidies wastage, because we've even had NLC threaten that if the government goes ahead to implement the removal of subsidy, that, you know, they will have to face some stiff reaction from the NLC, speaking on behalf of the people, according to what they say. So the issue of wastage and where this funding should or can come from will be a very big question for the incoming administration. If they take away the subsidy, we do know there are consequences. The issue of extreme hike in the price of petrol, among other things, and the overall effect, which will affect food and transportation, and, you know, seem to affect every other thing in the country. That would be one thing for the incoming administration to deal with. And even if they don't go that route, and then they still need the fund for this infrastructural gap, we're getting really close when it comes to our borrowings. Our debt is really high at 77 trillion naira. You know, so how or which wastage do you think can be plugged, or where do you think the new administration can look to when it comes to funding for infrastructure?
We must understand that NLC will always say they are fighting for the people, but you ask yourself, which people are they truly fighting for? I remember in your news I was watching now, they said they want to picket the CBN for the cash crunch. Meanwhile, the cash crunch has been with us for the last 3 months. They didn't do anything. It is after the election has gone that they want to start pretending to be fighting for the people. Honestly, the NLC has been a disappointment. The kind of fight they pick up, you find out that it's practically not reasonable kind of fight they pick up. So I would rather not talk about them, because this is not about playing politics with the lives of Nigeria. It's about reality. You just mentioned our level of debt now. So if you look at the kind of debt we have put in, I mean, we are sitting on, you have to say, what can we do to reduce this indebtedness and to build our infrastructure? What are the things we need to do? We need to do away with wastages. Honestly, I am not convinced we are consuming over 60 million liters of fuel per day. I refuse to believe that figure. I believe there's a huge lot of lies underneath somewhere there that nobody has bothered to look into. So if we remove that amount of money that is being thrown into that area, because you hear news of fuel being smuggled to neighboring countries, because while we are paying this subsidy here to make it 195 naira per liter, in neighboring countries it goes for 400, 500 naira per liter. So anybody could easily pay bribe to take a truck, 2 trucks, 10 trucks out of the country to go and sell at 400 naira when he has been paid subsidy here in Nigeria. So that's what we've been facing. So I support the fact that subsidy should go, as long as this money is paid, is plowed back into building good lives for Nigerians. We have, we've talked about rails, we talk about roads, talk about bridges, but we also will remember that we need a lot of tertiary health facilities in Nigeria. It is the reason why people go abroad and get caught, because of simple things that could have been done here if we have a proper system that works. So our tertiary, because of course I'm talking about tertiary because this is federal government we're talking about now, the primary health centers and I think the secondary ones should naturally be issues for state local government. So the tertiary health you're looking at cancer, modern cancer center, you're looking at dialysis center, you're looking at so many other huge infrastructural development in the health sector. So you will need a lot of money that you put into this area so that we can have development that continue. The current administration that is outgoing has done a lot in terms of roads and bridges. I remember since I started following news and events, since 1983, you hear we will build second Niger Bridge. Then when we came in 1999, we will build second Niger Bridge. Then 2011, we will build second Niger Bridge, until the Buhari administration came in and built it. So they have started on a good note, and they are leaving a solid foundation. I also know that there was no functional rail between Lagos and Ibadan, Abeokuta and Ibadan. Now that has been put in place, and there are plans already ongoing to cover the entire Nigeria in terms of rail network. So I think when people begin to see this, and when we talk about the fact that it will affect the price of food, it is true. But you also must look at, if you have public system of transportation that works, the need for private transport, commercial transportation will reduce to a large extent. If you can move goods from, let's say you are moving perishable food item from, let's say, Kano to Lagos, it's cheaper from Kano to Lagos if you use a rail system that works than if you hire a truck that could break down on the road, wait for 2-3 days before it is fixed, and the entire perishable good is damaged in that process. So you have to look at the pros and cons. There will be challenges, no doubt about it, but when you look at the short-term issues compared to the long-term gains that will be made if all these things are put in place, you begin to realize that this is a sacrifice we have to make. We cannot continue to pay subsidy for consumption that is a waste. Even if we're going to subsidize, I would rather we subsidize agriculture so that the level of price of food and things that edible things can come down to the barest minimum. I know the government, this current government, have tried in terms of creating all this. The CBN has gone out of its way, but we have not seen the result. You see the anchor borrower till today as we speak, nobody knows how much has been put into that program. Nobody knows how much has been spent and has been returned in terms of the loans that were taken in the anchor borrower program. You find out that some organizations that were created like the NASA, it has been plagued with a lot of corruption and allegations which they have refused to investigate. The EFCC were supposed to have investigated the former MD that was removed for corruption. Till today, we don't know what has happened. So these are areas that we need to look at. If you pour a lot of money into agriculture, it will reduce food prices, and when you reduce food inflation, the level of inflation in other areas will be manageable and minimal.
All right, Mr. Yellow, just briefly now, because we are already out of time, you are supporting the removal of subsidy. We do know that presently the federal government has formed a committee that's supposed to look at buffers to use, to reduce some of the impact, expected impact at the removal of subsidy. What from your perspective, because we know a former administration, that of former President Jonathan, did try it. We had bosses and all of that. I don't know how impactful that was, but how do you think, or what would be the best approach for this committee or for the federal government in removal of this subsidy? What can they put in place, to buffer some of the impact of it?
I have given an example of food inflation. If you are able to ensure that inflation in food prices is curtailed, one, if food prices don't jump up astronomically, then it makes life less difficult for people. Also, public transportation system. I know the current Ministry of Petroleum was trying to work on gas and stuff, but you see, they just create these things, make so much noise, and you don't see any result. I am hoping that the incoming administration will look at some other subsidies in terms of, some other options, in terms of curbing these challenges. But like I said, and like you also told me just now, we have a committee that is looking at buffers. Those buffers must include, but not limited to, checking how you can deal with the workers, their salaries, their emolument. And then if you are able to deal with public transportation, like I said earlier on, it will reduce the challenges, because what normally happens is cost of moving goods and services, especially food item from point A to point B, will be affected automatically if you increase the price of fuel. But if that is worked on, then we can have a better system so that the prices of food don't jump up astronomically and make the lives of Nigerians
All right, Mr. Ayobami Oyalowo, thank you so much, development economist, for sharing your views with us this morning. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Let's take a break now. When we come back, an interesting one. Do you know that states can now supply and produce electricity? We'll have that conversation after this break. It's here on Business Morning on Channels Television.
transition of power from the federal government to states. And this makes it possible for states to generate and transmit electricity within their borders. However, there are questions on how will this be implemented and what could it mean for tech ecosystems across the country. On the other hand, we also know that the challenges with infrastructure, with electricity supply includes infrastructural deficit, lack of policy support, poverty. We know that issue of electricity theft and payment of bills. Those are parts of those issues around electricity distribution, generation, and supply in Nigeria. So we have Professor Yemi Oke, he's a professor of electricity and energy law with us in the studio to share his perspective on this. Prof, good morning. Good to have you in the studio.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here with you again.
So a lot of people are very happy with this. We've been waiting for this ascent, and now it has come. Does it really change anything, or is it one of those things that will end on paper?
Well, to me, it's one intervention coming too late. It wasn't as if the challenges were not there before. Of course, the challenges were apparent to everyone to see, and we will be pointing it out. Right after the enactment of the Electric Power Sector Reform Act of 2005, some of us started pointing out the wrong direction the act went compared to the Constitution. I would say, we can't be having a federated grid structure in the 21st century. States will be incapacitated. We also advise states to take advantage of the windows provided in the second schedule, item 14, that states House of Assembly could make laws in respect of areas not covered by a national grid. To start to do a semblance of what we call off-grid generation, transmission and distribution, small scale, off-grid, captive, embedded, renewables, so that we can have something that will move us out of the woods in terms of the power sector. But telling me now that the change is just coming at the twilight of this administration, something that ought to have been done like decades ago. Are we just realizing that, or are we just trying to give us a parting gift so that the next administration will start to, well, it's better late than never. We have the law now, which means states cannot generate, transmit, and distribute in respect of areas even covered by national grid. The implication is this. We expect conflict of interest with the discos, perhaps gencos, because their franchising issue is always there. Which of the discos will distribute in the new franchise arrangement? For instance, Lagos now cannot transmit, generate, and distribute in respect of areas covered by the national grid, irrespective of whether federal government is doing a semblance of intervention. So, which disco? That was why I said it would be kind of smart or makes business and commercial sense for the existing structure, meaning the existing discos, perhaps gencos, to now get cross-licensed. For instance, we have Eco discos, we have Ikeja in Lagos. Lagos State government should see them and say, guys, yeah, this is a new structure. Can you handle these areas? Of course, fragment it, maybe not giving them that humongous franchise arena or area. Maybe balkanize it. Okay, you take Agege, you take Ikeja, you take Amuodo, you take VI, you take Lekki, something like that. We need to have active power sector intervention now that the gate is kind of open. But the question you people should be asking them, where is the money? Power sector is hugely capital intensive, and I wouldn't want a situation in which we go via the option we went when we told them that money didn't come.
Because I was going to ask, because when there was that privatization of NEPA to PHCN, a lot of people were excited and expectant that something new will happen. But even the discourse are telling us the tariffs are not service reflective, and so they cannot meet up. They're still using the old equipment. Now, you have asked also, some states are struggling to pay salaries. So, I mean, what is the assurance that the state can handle, even when they have the opportunity, you know, as you noted, to cover the parts that are not covered by national grid? Some states like Lagos were even doing the IPP, but, you know, a lot of states couldn't take advantage of that. So what's the assurance that this will make any difference?
Well, the way to go and the way the ought to have traveled will be for extensive state intervention by way of guarantees and assurances. The state government is not going to dip his hand in his pocket to give them money or to start financing those entities. It's going to be embarrassing because the capital intensity is just huge. We expect a state as credible as Lagos, perhaps Abuja, to roll out financing structure with attractive incentives and now partner with entities that have what it takes to finance power sector, not going the way we went.
Well, you're not going to bill your consumers or customers in dollars. You're going to bill them in naira. Bubble bust. One, you will now need to generate or bill enough equivalent of the loan you took plus interest before you can break even. And that was what led to this massive insolvency that we're witnessing in the power sector.
And you still have the issue of oil theft, power theft, and you still have the issue of bills and, you know, complaints around that.
You see, we're going to continue to have those. Something happened. There was a training I did with, permit me to say it, Abuja Disco on this power theft thing. It was a training. You know, what law could be effectuated to deal with that challenge. And then, of course, they were never aware of it because we're training judges and others in power sector, criminal law issues in the power sector. How do you prosecute electricity theft? The laws are there. They weren't aware. It was recently that the DISCO now tried to apply the laws to charge certain people for theft. Theft, I won't say inevitable recourse. It's a kind of inevitable recourse for Nigerians who cannot afford to pay huge electricity bills. And for reckless Nigerians who want to circumvent or cut corners. And I've said here several times, it is illegal to consume power and not pay. It is also wrong to pay for electricity that you have not consumed. Both are happening.
Prof, I think we'll have a lot of conversations because even the issue of conflict that you mentioned, now that states can go beyond, even into areas where the federal grid is also providing, those will bring conflicts in the coming days. But we need to stop now for today. Professor Yemi Oke, Professor of Electricity and Energy Law, thank you so much for your time, and we hope you'll be available when we want to continue this conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, good to have you. Yeah. All right, so as Professor Yemi Oke steps out, we have Will Ibom stepping in with the market numbers to tell us how that fared. We do know that the equities, was slightly up, slightly down last week. But what do I know? Will has everything. Hi, Will.
Hi, Edie. Good morning. Good morning. As you rightly mentioned, the equity was a bit of a mixed bag last week. We saw, I think, 2 days or 3 days of gains and 2 days, of losses.
And then a lot of marginal gains.
Yes. So
but eventually, I think the month was in the negative.
Yes, the month is in the negative. Month to date is now, year to date is still in positive. It's up 7%, about 7%. But month to date about 1.756% down in the negative territory. And we're just hoping that investors are still be cautious. That, as I said,
election is over.
It's over, but they're still on the cautious train.
Tell your investors the election
I will
is
definitely
over.
tell them. We'll go to the NGX and tell them. Okay, so we're going to kick off with the Forex market, where we saw the Forex reserves still remaining under pressure. It fell for the 10th 10th consecutive week. Gross reserves dropped by $163.67 million week on week to close at $35.78 billion, and that's as of March the 23rd. Now, Forex trading, however, at the FMDQ exchange closed positive. We saw a bit of mixed transactions there as well. It's closed 64.62% up to over $1 billion, and we saw FX spot as the IRD window also up 82.73% to $934.43 million. Now, when we look at the derivatives market, the total derivatives closed down 0.34% to $142.07 million. Now, meanwhile, we saw the value of the Naira at the NAFEX window strengthening marginally, though, by 0.02%, and that's about 8 kobo in value to 461 Naira 17 kobo, as against 461 Naira 25 kobo we had in the previous week. Now, we're seeing more of this slight marginal gains in the NAFEX window. We're just hoping that maybe it's the fact that we've had the Naira redesign policy that's strengthening the Naira a little bit, and that has been sustained for some time now. Now, the bonds markets, we still continue seeing yields dropping, bullish sentiment still persisting in that space. Average yield for the bonds market contracted by 8 basis points to 13.2%. And so for the Treasury bills market as well, we're seeing a bit of that sentiment, filtering in. But let's talk to Ladi Bello. He's a fixed income dealer, Access Bank, and he's going to share what happened, his perspective as to what happened last week and what we should expect this week. Good morning, Ladi Bello. It's good to have you on the program.
Hi, good morning, Will. Thank you for having me.
Now, Ladi, what can you say? We saw some, bullish sentiment still in the fixed income space. What can we attribute, last week's performance to?
Well, attention was skewed towards the monthly FGN bond auction, which was conducted last Monday. And prior to that, we saw markets really trade on a cautious note ahead of this auction. So we saw demand skewed towards some of the on-the-run maturities, especially on the 2037 and the 2049 maturities, where markets saw a bit of misprice there. So they saw a bit of opportunity in the secondary market to pick up some of those instruments. So we saw yields gradually trend downwards. So at the auction, where 360 billion was offered across the 4 buckets, the 28s, 2032s, the 37s, and the 49s, we saw markets actually trend downwards, given the bolstered system liquidity levels at the time. But DMO was able to borrow significantly more than that, at about 565 billion across these 4 maturities, with stop rates clearing at 14%, 14.75%, 15.2%, and 15.75% on the longest dated instruments. So as the week progressed, we saw liquidity thin out a little bit, where we saw a bit of profit taking across these same maturities, as the system liquidity actually closed in a repo of about 400 billion last week.
Okay, so we are looking more at the borrowings and expected, some analysts believe that yields should trend upward. Maybe this week we should see a bit of, bearish sentiments in the market. But with the government borrowings expected this year, what do you think that will happen? That would play out for the fixed income, that's Treasury bills, on the bond market in the short to medium term? What should we expect to see? Where do we expect investors to play in that, and where do you think we will see higher yields?
Yes, we do expect to see higher yields, as the maturities in the coming months are not as heavy as what we've seen in the first quarter of the year. So we expect the DMO to be under a little bit more pressure to meet up with some of its obligations. But by and large, we've seen the DMO typically issue between 70 to 80 billion across the 3 buckets. Now they've increased the maturity profile to borrow an average of 90 billion across 4 buckets this time, roughly from 225 billion all the way now to around 360 billion. And over the last 3 consecutive auctions, we've seen the DMO come into the market and actually oversell far above what is generally being offered prior to the auction. But this week, what we've seen is the DMO expected to offer a total of about 145 billion across the 91, 182, and 364-day Treasury bills. We've seen market spike from about 2.24% levels all the way to the 9.9, and then the 10% on the 364-day maturity. So we do expect a bit more increments, especially as the market is in repo at the moment. But we expect to see a bit of coupon payments, on average about 140 billion across the 2035 maturity, the Sukuk 2024, as well as the FGN 2050 bonds. We also expect a bit of a OMO maturity tomorrow of about 40 billion. So as we continue to see these factors play out in the markets, it would generally affect the direction of the markets in the short term. But the directional play this time around this week is the expectation of FACT disbursements from the federal government, which should generally trend downwards, which should take yields further south in the market. But into the second quarter of the year, we do expect rates to continue to inch up as the DMO seeks to mop up as much as it can to fulfill its obligations.
Okay, Ladi. Thank you so much, Ladi, for those insights. I know you have a lot to tell us. Ladi Bello is a fixed income dealer, Access Bank. We're running out of time, Ladi, so we'll talk some other time and you give us more insights to market. Thank you so much, Ladi, for this. So, Ini, as you've seen, the market is trending down, but we're expecting, some, positive sentiments to return to the fixed income space. We're expecting Naira to keep,
FAC also.
Yes, FAC. Flow into the markets. So that's what we have.
Yeah, thank you so much, Will. Well, Will spoke to Ladi and reminded us of our own Ladi. Unfortunately, it's not the show for this week, but I'm here for crypto numbers, even though it's going to be brief. But we see that greed sentiments continuing from last week all through the weekend at 64 out of 100. So this may be a good time for you to sell, depends on when you bought. Anyway, looking at the market cap, we see it's over 1 trillion naira. It was up 0.41%, almost 0.5%. Talking about that's in 24 hours. Talking about good for the market at this time. 24-hour volume is also more than 5%. BTC dominance, almost half of the market is being dominated by Bitcoin, and the price of Bitcoin has gone to 27,771.78, up almost 1%, 0.90%. It's a good time for the crypto space at this time. Fortunately, we do not have enough time to take Olumide additional. Olumide, I will talk to you tomorrow, but we have to draw the curtain because of the next program coming up. Here on Channel Television, I always bring you everything current and everything live. So the close of business morning for today, Monday, 1:30, we'll be back to give you an update from the world of business. Will Ibong will be taking that at 1:30. And I'll see you at 10 p.m. when I'll bring you the stock market report. So do join us here on Channel Television. Have a great day and make some money.